Right now, there are 8 billion people on this planet. Every single one of them started the same way. A single cell, smaller than the period at the end of this sentence, inside a human body, growing into a person. You already know this. You learned it in school. You've seen the diagrams. You know how it works. But here is the question nobody asks. What did people think was happening before anyone knew? Not 500 years ago. Not 1,000 years ago. We're going back further than that. 100,000 years. 200,000 years. Back when there were no doctors, no science, no microscopes, no biology textbooks. Just a woman, a growing belly, and absolutely no explanation for what was happening inside her body. What did ancient people think was going on? The answers are stranger than you expect. Some of them are terrifying. Some of them were surprisingly close to the truth. And one of them, written down over 1,000 years before modern science, described the human embryo in a way that scientists could not explain until the 20th century. This is the story of how ancient people understood where babies come from. To understand this properly, you have to put yourself in the position of someone who has never read a single biology textbook. You live in a small community. No cities, no hospitals, no schools. One day a woman in your group is perfectly normal. A few months later, her body is changing in ways that seem almost impossible. Her belly is growing. She is eating more. She is tired in ways she was not tired before. Then after 9 months, a new person comes out her body. A completely new human being. With eyes, with fingers, with a voice, fully formed. If you have never been told what is actually happening inside that body, what do you think is going on? This was the situation for most of human history. And the explanations people came up with, without any science to guide them, reveals something extraordinary about the human mind. Because they were not just guessing randomly. They were observing, reasoning, connecting dots with the information they had. The problem was they were missing a few very important dots. The very first explanations for pregnancy had almost nothing to do with men. In many of the earliest human societies, women were believed to become pregnant through nature itself. Wind, water, spirits, the moon. The Arunta people of Australia, one of the oldest continuous cultures on Earth, believed that spirit children lived inside certain rocks and trees and rivers. When a woman walked past one of these places, a spirit child would enter her body. The man had nothing to do with it. This was not ignorance. This was the result of careful observation with limited information. Because here is the problem ancient people actually faced. Sex and pregnancy are not obviously connected. There's a 9-month gap between them. For most of human history, no one made that connection. Anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski spent years with the Trobriand Islanders in the early 1900s, a culture that had had almost no outside contact. He discovered something that shocked the entire academic world. They did not believe sex caused pregnancy, not because they were unintelligent, because the evidence did not obviously point there. They had sex. Sometimes pregnancy followed. Sometimes it did not. They also walked past rivers. Sometimes pregnancy followed. The connection was not obvious. And without microscopes, without any way to see what was actually happening, they could not know. At some point, in different cultures at different times, people began to connect sex to pregnancy. This was one of the biggest intellectual leaps in human history. Not because it was obvious, because it required people to connect two things separated by 9 months and notice the pattern. Once that connection was made, a new debate started. What exactly was the man contributing? Ancient Greek philosophers, who were among the first to write about this seriously, had two main camps. Aristotle believed the man provided the life force, the blueprint, the soul of the child. The woman was simply the soil, the container, passive and empty until the man planted something inside her. Hippocrates disagreed. He believed both parents contributed something, a seed from each side, and the child was formed from both. This debate continued for nearly 2,000 years. Then in 1677, Antony van Leeuwenhoek looked through the first microscope and saw a sperm cell for the very first time in human history. And even then, scientists thought the sperm contained a tiny, fully formed miniature human called a homunculus, sitting curled up inside, just waiting to grow. The egg cell was not discovered until 1827. The full process of fertilization was not understood until the late 1800s. For almost all of human history, nobody actually knew what was happening. And then there is this. In the 7th century CE, over 1,000 years before the microscope, a text was written in the Arabian Peninsula that described the development of the human embryo in stages, stage by stage, in sequence, in accurate detail. The Quran describes the creation of a human being beginning with a drop of fluid, then a clinging clot. The Arabic word is alaqah, which also means something that clings and hangs. Modern embryology confirms this. In the early stages, the embryo attaches itself to the wall of the uterus and hangs there. It clings. Then the Quran describes a chewed lump, mudghah, something that looks like a chewed piece of flesh. In the early embryonic stage, the embryo develops visible somites along its back, segments that look exactly like teeth marks in chewed flesh. This was confirmed by scientists in the 20th century using electron microscopes. Professor Keith Moore, one of the world's leading embryologists and author of one of the most widely used embryology textbooks in the world, studied these descriptions in the 1980s. His conclusion was direct. The descriptions in the Quran of embryonic development are accurate, and they could not have come from the science available in the 7th century, because that science did not exist. Greek embryology, which was the most advanced knowledge available at the time, was wrong in almost every detail. The Quran was not drawing from Greek sources. It was describing something that would not be seen under a microscope for another 1,300 years. Here is what this all means when you step back and look at it. For almost the entire stretch of human history, nobody knew where babies actually came from. The greatest minds in ancient Greece got it wrong. Cultures that had been observing human reproduction for tens of thousands of years got it wrong. Scientists with microscopes in the 1600s got it wrong. The full picture was not assembled until the late 19th century. And yet, sitting in the middle of all that confusion and incorrect knowledge, there's a text from the 7th century that got the sequence right. Not roughly right. Not close. Right in ways that required technology that did not exist for another 13 centuries to verify. Ancient people explained pregnancy with spirits and wind and moonlight. Philosophers explained it with seeds and soil and life force. Scientists explained it with tiny men curled inside cells. And one text, written in a desert, in a century when none of the correct information existed anywhere on Earth, described what was actually happening inside a human womb. That is not something that gets explained away easily. Every person alive right now went through those exact stages. The clinging, the chewing shape, the bones, the flesh, before you had a name, before you had a thought, before you had any idea you existed. Ancient people looked at a pregnant woman and saw a mystery they could not solve. They invented explanations. Some beautiful, some strange, some surprisingly close. And somewhere in the middle of all those attempts to understand, one description got it right. Written down 1,400 years ago, long before anyone could see it, long before anyone could prove it, long before the microscope, the laboratory, the textbook. The question ancient people asked, where do we come from, turns out to have an answer that is more precise and more detailed than anything they could have imagined. They just did not have the tools to see it yet.